Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. I'm your host Manoj Agarwal, and today we'll be having a very exciting conversation with Mike Ryan. So, Mike, listen to this. He's a CEO advisor to nine unicorns. And unicorn, if you don't know what it means, it's a company which is worth $1 billion. So these nine unicorns have a combined market cap of $181 billion. In his exceptional career spanning 35 years, Mike has been a board member, CEO at technology, healthcare, international consulting companies. Mike has proven expertise and track record in starting, growing, leading, advising, and guiding more than 500 companies in the internet, telehealth, digital health, healthcare, and other technologies. He has served on 60 plus boards of companies. Previously, Mike served as a strategic advisor, board member, and interim leader uh, uh, and venture-backed companies globally from 1984 to 2020. Currently, Mike is the chairman of the advisory board at Tento Health. So, Tento Health is a digital health and diagnostic technology provider offering secure and decentralized healthcare solutions to governments, healthcare providers, businesses, and consumers. Mike is also the founder of healthonline.com, an interactive health technology company, and COO of an international healthcare consulting and contracting firm with offices in Washington, D.C., Florida, California, Italy, and Singapore. Mike is the winner of 2013 Top 100 Startup Experts to follow on Twitter, and he has also been providing technology solutions that are becoming increasingly important as the world adjusts to living with COVID 19. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you for that gracious introduction. When you hear that, now I hear that, I'm wondering who you're talking about. But with that, people read my LinkedIn profile, and I've been on there since the early days when there was only 25,000 of us versus 750 million.
Yeah.
And I should be about 185 years old, given that, because I'm always doing at least 5 or 6 things at the same time.
Yeah,
So.
no, it's funny. As you mentioned, like as we go through life, we tend to forget, what have we accomplished. I mean, and when you read after a long time, even when people read their own resumes after a long time, it's like, oh my God, I don't even remember I did that.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
I've, I've
So
been
let's
blessed.
take that point, and then I went through your journey, your exceptional career, but let's hear from your point of view. Can you take us down the memory lane and tell us how you started and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. I guess I've got to, it makes my wife sometimes laugh, sometimes cringe when I say, I have to go to my roots because much of what I have been blessed with, I was born in the United States. I was born to 2 parents that are entrepreneurs. I'm blessed that they are still with us. They celebrated their 90th birthday in January.
Wow.
They were born on the same day, same year.
Oh, wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
and they started a firm prior to me being born, and then they started another one in 1969, and then they did. This was a international healthcare consulting firm
I see.
based in Washington D.C. But they were just a little background because it really sets who I am. Is that here they are? Both of them were probably, I believe, they're both the first time in their family. They came from poor backgrounds. They were born during the Depression. But through education, they were able to lift themselves through the bootstraps. Mm-hmm. And my father, by scholarship, went to university in healthcare management, one of the first schools at St. Louis University. And then he ran a hospital down in Corpus Christi. And then an entrepreneur came back in the mid 50s and said, look, I'm starting a healthcare consulting firm. And he, at the time, was, he was 24, 25. And they went to Costa Rica, my mom, my dad, and my 3 older sisters. And so then my brother was born there. And then, they came back to the States, and I was born along with, I've got 8 siblings. Mm-hmm. And so then in 1969, my mom, who had 8 children, my dad was father of them, but, they started a new company. And the audacity and the taking that risk at that time when they didn't have parents that were entrepreneurs. My mom's from Kansas, Leavenworth, Kansas. My dad's from Atlanta, Georgia. They had no one to, kind of be a model or mentor, anything like that. So that's extraordinary. And I've been every week we talk with my mom, my siblings and us. And then I'm trying, and what I've done for the past year during COVID is interview her and my father as well. They've been divorced for 30 some years, but, and so, and finding out, what it took as an entrepreneur to, live in the club terror, as we called it, that Wilson Herald club terror, not fear, because fear's there, but terror that you're not going to make payroll, and you wake up in the middle of the night at 3:00 in the morning, and how are we going to, make payroll for 100 people or whatever? And so that, if nothing else, and I was 9 years old when they started the company, and so I remember licking stamps. Those are things that you have to put on envelopes, unlike email or other posts, and doing the announcement of the Ryan Advisors. And so that kind of, table settings where, you don't know what a weekend is. You're working 24 hours a day, stuff like that. Or they were. And eventually I end up being a chief operating officer of that company. And all my siblings work for the company at some point. But that was such an education. That was such an MBA or PhD in how startups get started, how they become successful. And they were international. So they were, in Rome, Italy, and Singapore 50 some years ago. And that was just kind of unique. So that kind of gives you a little bit. And we primarily worked with hospitals. And so I knew to be a hospital consultant, I need to understand the hospital from the other side. So I went to George Washington, got my degree from the School of Business there, and then worked at Providence Hospital and Ascension Health, a daughter's a charity health system, and did that working my way up through the ranks, eventually being a CEO. But to be honest with you, I was bored. I'm a bored entrepreneur. You can take the boy or the man out of the entrepreneurship, and you can't take the entrepreneurship for it. And so I eventually, 99, became a fully recovered hospital CEO, and became launching in my next career in helping startups, helping people as being a board member, because I had pattern recognition of the previous, almost 40 years with my parents. So that kind of sets a stage of who I am. And, my parents were very fortunate. Again, and we talked just a little bit before the show. I mean, I didn't grow up in India. I didn't go up in poor parts of the U.S. or whatever, and was very blessed with that. So one thing that I've done over the past, really 40 years or so has been a mentor, because I had great mentors. I had my parents to begin with. Then I had some of the leaders and the pioneers in healthcare. One was a religious sister who was the first chairwoman, although she said, "You call me chairperson or chairman." She said, "I earned the title chairman of the American Hospital Association." And so when you have that kind of, leadership that's willing to take you under the wing and stuff like that. So what I've done in the past 40 years is I have over 50 mentees. They do not look like me. They do not have my socioeconomic background. They do not have my pigmentation. They do not have my accent. And they're all over the world. I've been fortunate to be a lecturer, a mentor, and a judge for Draper University.
Wow.
And what Tim Draper has done, he started Draper University. It's a 12-story building in San Mateo. And he brings young entrepreneurs between the age of 18 and I think 27, and brings them in for intensive understanding of what it takes, usually bootstrapping a company. They take an idea, and how do you transform that into a company? And so at the end of each session, I sit through, along with Tim and some other folks that are part of the school, sit through and they bring in venture capitalists and a bunch of other people, and review 60 or so pitches. So I've seen over, I stopped counting over the years, but I've seen at least 5,000 pitches at Draper University or online with some other friends that run, incubators and stuff like that. So again, it's an exciting, every day's different for me. You know, unlike if I was on my mentor, who I mentioned before, she said, Mike, you're on a career track here. And I said, sister, with all due respect, it's not who I am. So that's one thing. You know, not everyone's an entrepreneur. And whenever I counsel folks that say, oh, I want to start a business, yeah, I say, okay, let's see if you're crazy or crazy enough, because you got to be crazy to do it. In many cases, I mentor, you know, folks that are 20 years old or 18 years old, but I mentor people who are in their 60s often, that want to start a business. And most businesses, you know, if you think of folks like Colonel Sanders, I think he was mid 50s. I think, you know, there's many examples. Ray Kroc, McDonald's, you know, some iconic names, right? That started with people who had life experiences, and then how do you take those life experience and have transferable skill sets and move that into building your own livelihood, your own brand. And so what I tell folks is that, you know, be prepared. It's a journey. It's a marathon. It is not a sprint, and you will have failure. Failure, as Reid Hoffman will always say, and people around Silicon Valley say, failure is more acceptable in Silicon Valley. But Reid always says, but it's not the goal. We learn from failure, because you absolutely, you know this. If you fail, you learn. If you've done something successful, you move on. You don't even think about, okay, what are the lessons we learned that we were successful? We often don't do that, right? But we do. Oh my goodness, how did I lose that, you know, opportunity? How did I lose that potential investment from a billionaire, or from, you know, a high net worth individual, or from, you know, someone, you know, how did I mess up my relationship with my partner or my co-founder and stuff like that? So you got to be prepared for failure. And you know, you hear this term also, perfection. What is it? Perfection shouldn't be the depth of goodness or good, right? Because if you always try to perfect something, it will never happen. You will literally never get your startup off the ground. And I say this to mentees and people I talk to all the time.
Absolutely.
Create Kitty Hawk. Get it off the ground, Orville. You know, get it off for at least 20 seconds. Don't try to build, you know, the space shuttle without the O-ring. You know, it doesn't have to take you 20 or 75 years, right? But Kitty Hawk was able to, you know, here's two guys from a bicycle shop in Ohio that had audacious and bold, you know, visions or whatever. So that's one thing. The other thing that which is kind of unique, and it also sets who I am, is that I'm severe dyslexic. And so, you know, even to say your name, Arterwall's an easier last name to say. I've got a friend who recruited me to his board. And if he's listening, hi, he's in Bangalore. But it took me about 2 years to say Shantanu Bhattacharya. But as you well know, Bhattacharya is spelled many different ways.
It's not Shantanu too. It's not a very complicated name. There are very, very much longer, much more complicated names out there.
Yeah, but for me, I don't even try those other ones, right? I say, oh, hi. And so anyway, so being a severe dyslexic, I've written a lot about this and talked to parents, and because, you know, they have kids that are struggling with it. And I remember being told, or my parents being told when I was in second grade, Mike has flunked phonics. I had no idea what phonics was. I still can't spell phonics. And found out, you know, that I had dyslexia. And so when you're in elementary school and high school, being a dyslexic is really a curse. And just striving to get a passing grade. And so, but when you go to college, at least you'll find this classical when you look at a lot of dyslexic, they tend to excel. Either they drop out of school and they don't go to school, or, you know, Bill Gates, you know, Steve Jobs, all those folks in the dyslexic world, or they go to school and they excel. Someone like Toby Cosgrove. Toby Cosgrove, I don't know if you know, but he's the former CEO of the Cleveland Clinic, like a thoracic and heart surgeon that, you know, had to pass a lot of grades to do that. So, but what you do is you build your own system. So the segue in why I'm bringing up my background in dyslexia is that 35% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic. And there's been a lot of research on that. And then about 25% of CEOs, not necessarily of startups, are also dyslexic.
Wow.
Most probably famous one who came out of the closet dyslexic is John Chambers of Cisco Systems.
Oh, nice.
And John, has been a great advocate of what the dyslexic CEO is and the mind and whatever. And why is that? First of all, you build your own system as a dyslexic, as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
The other is you deal with chaos. And so your name or anyone's name or numbers or whatever, the best way I try to give a visual is if you had alphabet soup, and I have the A's and B's or whatever, or I think there's also a cereal that's called alphabet. And you take that and you start to formulate a word and then stir it up and then try to read it. It will never happen. So there's a lot of chaos in startups, in starting a company. There is a lot of chaos moving forward, and how do you juggle those multiple things? And it's done in a non-linear way. And that's how the dyslexic brain thinks. And that's why dyslexics in general, 35% are good, the other 40 or 60, do my math here, another 65% aren't dyslexic. But it is quite a unique, observation that's been made by researchers over the years. Richard Branson, Edison, you can go down, people who are in science or, starting companies or whatever, have that kind of gift. I call it the gift of dyslexia now, not the curse.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Thank you so much for going into the depth and sharing all that. I mean, a lot of takeaways. First one being, as you said, entrepreneurs are always sort of trying to focus on multiple areas. That's what drives them. And then resilience, like you mentioned, anything that comes in the way needs to be taken up as a gift. Like you just mentioned, if you overcome that and you build systems around it, you will actually go much farther because you had to overcome that challenge, and the growth happens through that challenge. So that's amazing. And also, how was it living with 8 siblings and entrepreneurs? Did you I noticed that you do a lot of work in healthcare, and your parents were entrepreneurs in the healthcare industry.
Sure.
So was that sort of the impact, the influence that you carried forward, or you got interested in healthcare on your own?
Well, I think there's no doubt that, through osmosis, sitting around the kitchen table and hearing about hospitals, healthcare, CEOs, doctors, all that 99% influence. I mean, that's, but I think that the ethos, or the underlying empathy, my dad gave me my first set of architectural plans. I remember it vividly when I was 15 years old. And he said, go, look these and tell me what you think. But one of the things that stuck with me, I later became a unit clerk while I was going to George Washington in healthcare management, is to focus on the patient. And with that caveat, assuming you act like the patient is your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, aunt, your grandmother, or whomever. Again, I always put the caveat, assuming you like them. And so, how do you design a hospital room around that? How do you develop digital healthcare around the individual, whether they're a patient or a patient's family or whatever? So I think the underlying understanding of humanity and the patient, or us as individuals, I think was another kind of a gift that I learned from my parents. Could I have gone into law or something else? Maybe. I technology as one thing that drove me crazy in hospitals. I mean, with all due respect, in hospitals, we tend to be, 10, 15 years behind, Amazon or whatever. But it's also difficult. So, every tech entrepreneur who started, Jim Clark started Healthion after he did Netscape. Sergey and Larry did Google, and then they did Google Health. Steve Case did America Online, then they did Revolution Health. Even Haven, Berkshire Hathaway. And, Jamie Morgan did Haven recently, right? And what's happened with that? Poof. And why is that? It is difficult. So I give my former brethren that I used to run hospital with a little bit of break in that why technology hasn't been adopted, right? As it has in the business world. I think it's coming. I think that watch out what I see. I just participate. I'm a advisor of the Doc SF at UCSF, and we just had a 2-day seminar on that. And so there's some extraordinary technology. One of them was called, I think I got to get it right now. It was Baby X, but that was and it's AI. And it's like you and me, you couldn't tell the difference if you and I are as an AI avatar.
Yeah.
And so how does that help? It helps for the clinician in that as routine follow-up things or education or whatever, you don't have to listen. You don't have to read a, for dyslexic, it's crazy, but you don't have to read a pamphlet, or a whole thing. You actually can interact with that. And we're getting so well. And now there's a little scary part of that. If you watch science fiction, you see some of the downside of that. But I think as long as we're able to, have the human and ultimately in control and take care of these, advances in technology to help healthcare make a digital transformation. I think that's key. Going back to, you mentioned Tento, and I think we called ourselves, we were Tento Health, now we're Tento Applied Scientists. It's applied science. Of course, I trip over the words, right? Mm-hmm. And the key there is that, who owns the data, right? And who has responsibility for that? And, historically, it's been with the providers. It's been with the insurance company or whatever. But I think over the next 10, 15 years, and it may, hopefully during my lifetime, my parents are 90, and hopefully I've got another 40 years or so to go. Hopefully we'll be able to use data for good, technology for good, to advance research, to advance patient outcomes, patient delivery. Yeah. One of the biggest things that happened during COVID and the impact is COVID. It really didn't impact me and what I do for a living. I talk to people from Sydney to Bangalore and to Hong Kong to Sweden every day, and I do it by Zoom, right? And how others were impacted for the first time, even though digital telemedicine or telehealth, right, was done. Historically, I always say this is a 60-year technology. Yeah. We had the astronauts do this back when they were in, Apollo 11, and we just, celebrate their 70th, the 50th anniversary. Mike Collins was a neighbor of mine growing up, and he was doing the command module. But Neil Armstrong and Buzz were, landed on the moon, 1969, right? Yeah. And guess what? They had telemedicine. They had telehealth. And there's a great scene, if you watch any of these documentaries that I saw in the last 6 months, there's a Neil, Mike, and Buzz are in the command module, and Mike was tired. He took off his electrodes. And Houston said, Apollo, we've got a problem. Kind of a switch, right? Apollo, we have a problem. And Neil said, what's going on? He said, well, you know what? We don't have Mike's vital signs. And of course, Mike's sitting there and he's listening to all this or whatever. This is towards the end of the mission. Yeah. And he says, I'll tell you what, I'll tell you when I stop breathing. Because he can still communicate. But my point is, we have seen such an acceleration of telehealth and telemedicine. Why? Economics. The technology has really been there. Some great folks at Cloudbreak, and my good friend Jamie Edwards runs that, and there's many others that are out there, that we have seen more venture capital come towards telehealth and telemedicine, and a lot of people had pivoted towards that, right? Because follow the money. But because under the COVID emergency powers, reimbursement through Medicare and Medicaid for seeing patients remotely, because first of all, for one of the biggest or most largest or most frequent surgery in the U.S. are hips and knees, orthopedics.
I see.
We got rid of those last year for about 4, 5, 6 months, and so first of all, even when we open up, people don't necessarily want to go back into the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't get COVID. This is before the vaccine.
Got
But we had a podcast which had, I think, close to 10,000 people, with mostly in orthopedics, and we talked to the folks at NYU and Sloan Kettering, and the head of orthopedics had never used telemedicine. We're talking about from the provider side. And we asked him, we said, well, how often are you using it now? He said, I use it, I just finished with 15 patients today. And so that, I think we're at the tipping point from telemedicine, telehealth, as far as that. With that comes sensors, and we have 1 billion sensors, or whatever, 2 billion. We've got almost 8 billion people, and eventually, multiple person will have multiple sensors, from your shoes to your watch to your diabetic sensors or whatever. And so what's that mean? Doesn't mean anything other than, okay, I can scan and get my heart rate, or I can do that. What are you going to do with that data that helps humanity, medical research, development in drug research, and where, a lot of drugs, we do clinical trials. I wrongly predicted, I can do that sometimes, when COVID hit and they said about the vaccine, I extrapolated wrongly that it would take at least three years, to do that, because it typically takes 15 years to get a vaccine. We work on the bioscience and life sciences folks industry as well, and it usually takes 12 years and $3 billion to take a drug from concept or out of the university into the clinic. Into the lab, and then into the first clinical trials. So for that to happen, as far as the vaccine, we're very fortunate that we live in the time that we live, and because of what is it, ARNA, mRNA. Thank you. It's been transformative. And so with that, kind of saying, what are some of the things that are going to happen? I think the AI is going to be like this as far as use. And so we don't displace the clinician. We still have a friend of mine's a radiologist in Pennsylvania. There are 11,000 openings for radiologists in the U.S. alone.
Wow.
That's not okay. Don't even talk about India or other places in the world. So, people are choosing, and nurses, or you look at nurses, right? Going back to my mom, she had very few choices, probably none of them when she was growing up to be an entrepreneur, but it would have been teacher and nurses for women. And now there's so many choices, right? And so I think that, we're seeing the use of AI to help take care of anything from staffing to medical, diagnosis to vaccines and all that. But what comes out of AI is, and this is the goal of mine, and I mean that in not necessarily economic, but I mean as far as advancing social good and all that, as I talked about earlier, is taking data that is how do you say that word? Anonymize. Take the not anonymize, and I think there's something like 18 anonymizers, or 15 things that will say who you are, who's Mike Ryan on a chart or whatever. And you take the 18 things out, then you can use my history and all that. That others can then use machine learning or whatever. So one of the companies we advise, brought in by a VC to help them out, is looking at partnering with hospitals and health systems that have this treasure trove of data. And I would say, as a former hospital CEO and board member of a hospital, is that you have fiduciary responsibilities. And I would say part of that fiduciary responsibility is making sure you're leveraging the best out of your, obviously you're doing patient care, and you're taking care of your employees and all that, and your community health and all that. But the other is, how are you using data to advance medical research, to advance even patient care and delivery and systems? Because then that people who are looking for anonymized data sets are medical device companies, are drug companies, are patient care companies, or sensors and all that. And so this company SegMed has partnered with, I think, about 70 hospitals and health systems, and they help them do that because there's such a disconnect between what the need is and all that. So, but it's critical that you keep that trust there and that you're not breaching that. And so one of the things that, going back to Tento, is really on a global basis, not just the U.S., and SegMed does that too, but on a global basis, really looking at, because of COVID, how do we know everyone has a vaccine? How do we know that it's true? I mean, if you go to Africa, they have the yellow cards and all that kind of stuff, right? And I had a friend who just went to Africa, a neighbor here, and he said, Mike, he showed me the card. He said, I could afford this. Not that he would have, but he said, what's the verification that this is authentic? And so if you have that digitally,
that's true,
right? If you had it digitally, then I think it makes people, now we're open, Europe's opening travel to U.S. citizens and whatever. I don't know if people are comfortable with that, but it's still, there's still quite a bit of hurdle as we open up the world. And then, I remember talking to my friends in India, my colleagues, that, India was not hit, last March. And there was, why was it? And there was a lot of theories. Oh, it's the copper pipes, it's the food, it's the diet, it's all that, right? And we throw that out the window, or the rural settings, right? And so, it's definitely, a crazy world to know, we are global, we are a global world. And, every day we're out there, and as people want to come back and travel and do that, then that's critical. And it's also critical for bringing talent to here, and vice versa. As we, there's no secret that, I think 1/3 or more of Silicon Valley companies have someone of Indian descent, right? And that's, and as we went through and just, had, just put up the barriers by having a COVID pandemic happening, it just started trade. I've got, again, friends that are from Bangalore. They've got a daughter and son that were, one was training at Hopkins, the other was going to go to the University of Maryland. Time out, exactly. Because I don't want to put them at risk. I don't, what happen when something happens, right? So I think COVID's definitely had an impact on us, and it's, as they say, too much there. I mean, there's just, we could spend an hour on just talking about that, but I don't know.
Absolutely. Like I have, I have shared experiences just like you. I've done a lot of work in education and healthcare fields, and there has been a lot of concern about privacy, security, and again, being a technologist, this is a unique sort of angle that I look at, because I am involved in business side, working with executives and working with engineers on the technology side. I find a lot of disconnect between understanding of what this data means, what the concern really is, because as you mentioned, artificial intelligence is so powerful. Like, we are using it in many fields, and the results have been mind-blowing. Even for a guy like me, I have 4 patents in AI.
Right.
I am surprised all the time what the technology is able to do, even today. And I can only imagine what will happen in 5 years.
Right.
But the disconnect I see that is a lot of the people who raise concern about privacy and security of data, they're happy plugging into public Wi-Fi at Starbucks, not understanding that it's totally against what they were advocating in the boardroom.
Right.
So I think that level of anxiety has also been affected by COVID, because of the urgency, because of clarification of what this all means, availability of funding, as you said. And I think a lot of people forget the Genome Project, because a lot of the things that studying the DNA, mRNA, it actually came from there. But if we didn't have that, I don't think this vaccine
could be 15 years. Yeah,
exactly.
We'd still be no doubt about it. And I think in response to that, I think that people know what they know, and so they don't even think about Wi-Fi. And there's a great commercial. I don't even know who it is, but it's basically say, "Oh, Mom, can you give me your 401 K number because I can get some free, French fries?" And someone says, "Honey, I gave away your birth date because of this." And so we don't think about stuff that we give away.
Exactly.
But I guess the analogy would be, well, look what banking has done over the past 10, 15 years, right? I mean, there's really, with all due respect to people who've been bank tellers, there's really not a need for that, right? Except for maybe some private banking, but who goes to that? So you do banking, you do Zelle, you do Venmo, you do PayPal, whomever else. We're going completely digital, and so I think that what in healthcare, they tend to be healthcare providers, doctors, hospital administrators, CIOs, and all the folks in that realm are very conservative. And so they see themselves as stewards. I mean, when we think about most hospitals started from religious organizations, right? They were, from the Catholic point of view, they had the frontiers that they would go to Cincinnati, Ohio, or they go to San Francisco or whatever. The bishop would be there and say, they'd ask some sisters to come and start a sanitarium, and it was usually 10 beds. But you look at the large health systems, that's how it started, or a Jewish health system, or the Baptist, and mostly the South or whatever. But still, 92% of hospitals are non-for-profit 501c3 charity organizations. So I think that is one, something you got to take in consideration versus being a hospital corporation America founded in 1969 by the Frist family, or, AMI or Tenet, which is now Tenet. I think they tend to be more business focused on that, and not that they don't have the same stewardship. And I've worked for all of them. It's just a way of thinking. And I think as they've seen, what had the success of the vaccine has done because of using the derivatives of the Genome Project. My goodness, where we're headed with that. I mean, my son, I got two sons, one will be 30 tomorrow, another one is 16. And, how their lives will change, with what has happened. I'm fortunate, like I said, I have two parents that are, 90 years old. Not everyone is that fortunate. And, it will be I told my son, I expect I may not be around, but I expect you to be 120. So,
I think it'll be.
So take care of yourself. Now, Larry Ellison may be alive too. Or maybe he's has that secret sauce already, and he's already gone. He's already gone for his 300 years.
Got the serum before anybody else.
Exactly.
Awesome. No, this is amazing. Now, what are some of the as we get the vaccines and sort of some sort of normalcy comes back, what do you see are the long-term effect of business, our lives? Do you see our behavior as human species is going to change in any way, or it is going to go back to normal as it used to be?
No, it never will. It drives my wife, the new normalcy or normal. And I don't know the enough English to know what's correct or not, but the way it used to be, right? Back to the future. I think that if you look at just kind of take the current situation and understanding what's happening in India and Brazil. I mean, it's terrible, and I think there's a long tail to that. So I think I couch my response in that. I don't think it's 15 years, but I think it's a long time. I think my youngest son's generation. Again, look, I mean, he has been in high school since 90 or 80% of his high school year has been, or high school tenure has been online. And he's in school today, but he's only in 4 days every 2 weeks. Wow. And the other's done off school. So just think of that as far as the impact of that generation that is 24, because I'm basically making some assumptions that people 24 and younger, unless you go for advanced degrees and stuff like that, are educated. And that's, I think, is about 80 million people. It's very similar to the millennials and the baby boomers. And so I think you have to look at it generationally. folks that are in my generation, I'm towards the end of the baby boomers, you know, not impacting that much. You know, we probably did a lot of saving by not traveling if, you know, you're a certain, and, you know, for some people, right? Other people, you know, have been devastated by it. You know, we've lost almost 600,000 people.
Yeah.
You know, and so we've lost as many people we lost in, I think, all the wars combined, you know, Vietnam, and it's impacted everyone, including, you know, myself. I've had, you know, 2 aunts and 2 uncles and a brother-in-law pass away. Now, not all of them due to COVID, but the impact that had on our health system, I think, is a residual for another decade or two. How that impacts on our business, I think, is there for at least a decade. And so I think you have to segment the market by saying, you know, those that are going to school. I mean, why do you need to go to a 4-year baccalaureate degree? You know, Phoenix University. I'm not plugging them. Never went there, whatever. But guess what? They were ahead of the time because, you know, if you're looking for the book knowledge or the learning, you can do it there. Obviously, I'm an advocate for in person and all that, but the reality. I mean, my friend who's in India, you know. He's for you know, as a parent, fearful for your child. You don't want them to go, you know, even to the U.S. where he's lived. He's now a U.S. citizen and stuff like that. You've got concerns, and so I think that trickles down to the education system. Then I think it trickles down to the business and people who are starting the next, you know, Microsoft, the next, you know, Salesforce, the next, you know. You know, you take it that hasn't the AI company of the future that hasn't Amazon that hasn't even been invented yet, right? Because they're now home alone, you know, and that's had an impact. I mean, I just saw something from the Kaiser Foundation, Family Foundation. 41% of people are impacted by depression and loneliness. It's worse if you look, if you break it down for those between the age of, I think it's 12 to 18, it's 60%. Now you tell me that's not going to have an impact on their lives.
For sure.
And on, you know, again, I'm couching the whole response of how's this impact business, because what's business? Business isn't computers and, you know, routers and modems and, you know, business are people, you know.
Exactly.
And I've got a friend I just talking yesterday, and he works for Google. And he said, Mike, he said, you know, I was the last guy out of there. And he's you know, he's the last guy. I didn't want to really leave because we like human reaction in life. And he says, in September, when they plan to open the doors, I'm going to go back. He said, I actually went back like the day after the last day, and I tried to knock on the doors, and they said, you can't come in. And he said, okay, get me a supervisor. Nope. Can't come in. Okay, give me a supervisor's vice president. Nope. And so, you know, think of the impact. I mean, early on, Facebook, give them credit, Twitter, all these tech companies said, we don't want to expose our employees that. Now, they're very fortunate. You know, they can remote, they have, you know, we have the, you know, thought workers, right? Or whatever. We're not, you know, frontline people who are at the grocery stores, frontline people who are doing surgery. I've got a daughter-in-law who's a nurse at Baylor. You know, she's taking care of COVID patients and stuff like that. So there's no choice for them but to go in. But if I'm Mark Benioff, even though I built a huge new building here, you know, why am I going to put risk there? So think of that as far as business impact on, you know, as much, I've heard as much as 40% of office buildings, you know, although a lot of them have long-term leases, right? Why do we need them? You know, the mental impact COVID's had and the residual impact that has had and continue to have for at least this generation that was born in it. I mean, I guess my parents lived through the Depression and Pearl Harbor. My grandparents were, you know, my grandfather was in World War I. And so, you know, World War I and the first pandemic that we had in the U.S. was impactful. But for my children, my daughter who lives in Paris and my son that lives in Dallas, my son that lives here, you know, this is going to be a watershed events and how this impacts everything from their, obviously, public health, but just their relationships and how do they deal with that. So I think, you know, the long answer is that I think that it's basically, if you go to old ruins, you see, the watershed marks of what things happen. We'll look back at 2020 and 2021, hopefully learn and be stronger, because I'm an optimist that we will. But I think it will have a generational, maybe 25 years impact on folks in how they start businesses and grow them. On the other hand, I will add, and I've done many, talks and speeches about this. The best time to start a company is during a recession. Because you number one, you can get talent, right? You can get people that are very talented that may have lost their job, had nothing to do with them. You can we call it dumpster diving, although I don't think you need to go dumpster diving. So you look for chairs and computers and stuff like that. We used to do that after the crash of the .com. And you're a little bit, let's say you're starting your own company and you're bootstrapping it, right? And I had a guy at a local technology company ask me, he said, and he's 51. He said, how do I start my company? I said, first of all, come up with an idea. Yeah. And I hear this all the time. Oh, I got a great idea, but I'm afraid someone's going to steal it. I said, don't worry. I use a quote off. I said, good artists copy, great artists steal. And I stole that from Picasso. But the point is, don't care about stealing your idea, because what's it all about? Execution, exactly. And getting it done. I mean, I don't know, my friend Eric at Zoom was, I think, one of the chief engineers at WebEx. Why do you need another video platform? We have WebEx, you got Google, exactly. And he, after they sold to Cisco, he said, Mike, we went to them to give us, we thought this was a good idea, and they basically said no, okay, that's it. And so he said, I took my 40 engineers and we started this other company, and then one of their advisors, Jim, actually named it Zoom. And so, here is, an opportunity where something was doing very well. Eric is a very humble man. Hi, Eric, if you're watching. And he, built it around a concept where he was moving by train 2 hours to see his then girlfriend, now wife. And the latency, as we all know, if you've been around for 25 years or so, you get all that, or you don't hear half the things we're saying. And he's built a better mousetrap. And he did it, they went public, I think, 19, and they had about 10 million, users. But they really focus on the enterprise user, right? Not the public. But when schools closed, businesses closed, churches closed, synagogues closed, guess what? We had no way to do that, to communicate, or the bandwidth was so wild. So, they went from 10 million to 300 million people globally. And, he did a smart thing, an altruistic thing, because he's a good guy. And, he's a businessman too, but he gave it away to 100,000 schools. And so, now how's the impact, COVID on business? Those kids now know a verb, and Saturday Night Live and everyone else, they've been Zoomed, even Zoom bombed. The one thing that I give Eric a lot of credit, and I've told him that, and he responds great, is that, because they were building it as an enterprise solution and not a consumer, and there's a big difference, and that as given your background, and many of the viewers may, but the security, the security thought was built into their enterprises, right? And not necessary to my home, right? As we talked about earlier, right? They give away our Wi-Fi or whatever. So you had, Zoom bombing. Well, he said in 90 days, we're going to take care of this. They brought in some experts and whatever. And I think that's a great, probably Harvard Business World case study of how Zoom could have been Zoom to a bomb. But I think his legacy is that, has taken care of that, and that he has literally taught students all over the world, how to move forward with education and learning. during a COVID process. And then that will, spawn other entrepreneurs and other people to, say, oh, I want to start my own company. But again, going back to your question, it's like, how do you get started? Well, just do it. Yeah. And, if you're an entrepreneur, you've probably been doing it, your whole, if you're a dyslexic entrepreneur, you've probably been doing it. But as far as anyone else, it takes a lot of risk. And I can tell you, I tell this story often that I was in a coffee shop here a few blocks from my house, and a woman who's pregnant talking to this other guy across the, table. And she said, he can't join any more startups. I've got another baby coming. So, it's easier to do it when you're younger. And so, if you're coming out of school, you have a lower salary base or you're higher risk. And so that's why you have these clusters of, startups in, the Bay Area. You've got them in, say Chicago and New York and Boston. And even now, Miami's becoming a hotbed.
Yeah.
And Texas, obviously Austin Texas, as well. Yeah. So, and I'm saying the U.S., obviously I work with folks all over the world, but it's a good time to start a company. And I think that, because tomorrow is the worst time, right?
No, I completely agree. And one phrase that comes to mind, Elon Musk says, if you need encouragement, then don't become an entrepreneur.
Right.
But if you stick with it, and as you said, if you apply yourself and sort of, just take it one day at a time, the rewards are spectacular, right? Like once you get there where you are going to, it's your life's work. Basically, it becomes your life's work, right?
Yeah. I think that you look at, I look at my siblings, almost across the board, except for maybe one. They're all entrepreneurs, and we were on the phone yesterday with my mom, and talking about that my brother just wrote a new book and his second one, all this stuff, and the other brother has a publishing company. My sister and her husband have a company, stuff like that. So, it's sometimes easier because you grew up in that kind of culture or whatever. And it is scary. I recommend a book, and I get no plug for this, but people say, there's something I can read or whatever. I said, well, I like the hard things about hard things, which Ben Horowitz wrote. Again, I listen by audio. And the funny thing about that, I remember when I started listening to it, and Andreessen was doing a lot of Twitter back then when it first came out. And so I got one of the first copies. I signed up to it, and they're talking about, how they started Netscape, and then they were doing WhatsApp, is that what it was? Or something like that. Ops, and again, my dyslexic. And during the reader or the voice actor was saying, Mark Zuckerberg did this, and Mark Anderson did this, and Mark Anderson did that. I said, who the hell is Mark Anderson? and so I dropped Mark Andreessen a Twitter direct message. I said, guess what? I was just listening to your partners, the other part of Horowitz, or Andreessen Horowitz, right? Your partner's new book, which is very good, but I have no idea who Mark Anderson is. He said, Mike, you got a what's the word? A two-headed penny. We changed it already. I had gotten one of the first audiobooks of that. So, it's crazy. Just thinking of other things that, it's not easy being an entrepreneur,
It's not easy, but it's fun. Like,
it's fun. Yeah. I wouldn't have it. Again, I was on a track, as my mentor told me, could be making, lots of money being, believe it or not, you can make money being executives in hospitals and stuff like that. But I was bored to death. Every day was the same. And I love, the atmosphere of patient care and working. I went back 10 years after I left as a hospital executive or CEO, and they came back here. Are you coming back? No, I'm running companies and I'm having fun doing that. So I think it's, it's definitely terrifying, but also, the best high you can have in having positive impact on your world, on your family, on your colleagues, on your partners, on your employees, or anyone else. And I think that That's really I think the real value. And, I mean, people say this, but I think it is true. The monetary thing. Well, if you're going in for the monetary thing, you be careful.
Yeah.
Because
I
if
mean,
you think,
you have to treat the monetary gain as a byproduct, right?
because I mean, I've dealt with many folks that were would-be entrepreneurs, or let's say even consultants, and setting up an entrepreneur thing, and suddenly, and these are high-powered people that are making six-figure, mid-six figures, sometimes seven figures, and suddenly they're washing the bottles, and they're doing all the little things. And I say you wear at least 12 hats when you first start out, even if you have a business partner. You're doing the pitches, you're doing the PowerPoint, you're doing the answering the phone, you're doing all those things. And guess what? You're not pulling down a six-figure salary, more than likely. If you are, I hope you don't have investors other than your friends, families, and fools, as they say.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Once again, this was a very enlightening, enjoyable conversation.
Yeah, same here.
Thank you so much. Before I let you go, can you tell us if people want to connect with you, they want to reach out, how can they do that?
Sure. I think that one of the best ways is LinkedIn. Although I will tell you, if you can just let me know you saw the show, or just so I have some point of reference, because I have over 30,000 direct connections, and for whatever reason, they capped it out at 30,000. So at any given time, I've got about 2,000 people wanting to link with me. And the other is you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Mike Ryan, or Healthcare Guru. I've had that since about 2006. And as far as the Twitter handle, and happy to talk to anyone at any time. I always look forward to continuing kindness, continuing being a mentor, continuing to help. As people say, I'm not a contractor, but I'm a builder. And hopefully builder of other people's dreams.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll put those links in the show notes so that people can reach out easily. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you for your hosting. Bye.
Thank you.